Welcome to the Learning and Design Masterminds podcast, a podcast that focuses on instructional design related topics, including trends and issues in the field. I am Daisy Barreto, your host, and with me somewhere on the screen is our co-host Sherry, and we're excited to be your guide as we explore these exciting topics in instructional design. In each episode, we explore the latest trends, the case studies, practical tips from professionals in the field that can help you deliver exceptional learning experiences. And here with us today is Ian Jones, an MIT alumnus. And Ian, could you please tell more about yourself, your position?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. My name's Ian Jones. I am the proud principal of Denver Online. We are an online blended personalized school in Denver, Colorado. We're part of the Denver Public Schools School District. I am a 2008 graduate of the MIT program at UNCW, and I have been a school leader in this type of an environment for the last 16 years. I started out my career as a middle school teacher and moved into instructional technology in Pender County schools. Did that for a while, moved out to Colorado, did it for a little bit longer, and then got into school leadership. And here I am today, 12 years deep at Denver Online, and have undergone a lot of shifts and changes over the years. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And especially because like you touched on this topic of change management,
Mhm.
and it is one part of our classes and coursework, based on your experience in management, how would you define management in the context of your professional experience, right? Like especially at the school level, what does that look like, for someone that, all these layers that they may not see. And then I'm just giving here an example, like, for from a perspective of a teacher or an instructional designer is different than someone that is the principal overseeing everything, right? So if you can just really tell us how do you
Yeah.
see that, and then also talk to maybe an audience too, like, because sometimes it's like, students that are learning about this and like, what does this look like in the application setting, right?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. And what was interesting is when I did my final paper for the MIT program, I included a quote that was not an academic quote at all. It was actually a quote from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, actually. And it was, the quote at the beginning was, life moves pretty quick, and if you don't stop to take a look around, you might miss something. What's really interesting about that is when I transitioned from the charter school to Denver Online, I had a mentor, I would call him. He was a superintendent that I worked for, and he and I would have breakfast a lot. And I had breakfast with him right before I started with Denver Online, and I said, "Look, I need to know how do I enter. I've always been involved in creating new systems, and how do I enter somebody else's organization and make sure that I just don't come in, and with a machete and start blowing things up, start just chopping things down and blowing things up." And he looked at me straight in the face, and he's like, "Ian, you have two eyes, two ears, and one mouth." He was like, use those proportionately. And it's exactly what I did when I got here. I literally, and to me, that spoke to needs assessment. It spoke to needs analysis. It spoke to kind of that design process, if you will. And so I got to Denver Online in August of 2014 or July of 2014. And I watched and I participated on the day to day as the principal, and I dealt with the little fires and things like that. But I was really more kind of watching. I was taking notes. I was talking to the staff to learn about where some of the pain points were, where some of the areas that we could start to make shift. And then when by the second semester, I had really kind of developed out a plan, and it was really a change management plan. I mean, that's what I was drawing from was this idea that, we're if I'm going to change, change needs to be necessary, especially when people have been working in an organization for a long time. I mean, one of my school counselor has been here since the dawn of the school in 2003. So he had already been with the school for a decade. He'd seen two principals, he'd seen lots of things happen, and I wanted to keep him because he's the best. And it was the same for a lot of other people. And so it was really about just trying to dig in, look at the needs of the school, and start to, make people aware of these are the changes that I see that are necessary, involving people in the conversation. Luckily, I had a nice small staff, so we were nimble at the time, and so I was able to create this environment where they felt like they had provided voice and feedback. And then when I rolled out the plan, it wasn't like a surprise. It was more like, oh yeah, where are we going to start? And so we started, and we actually build our own curriculum. We don't purchase. And that was one of the things that I heard very loud and clear from both the district level and at the school level is there is no silver bullet regarding curriculum. And so we started building courses, and that's been just a very fluid, iterative, and expensive process over, many, many years. But it's really just this idea that paying attention to the needs analysis section, and I think that was one of the things that was really hit home with us in the MIT program. I can't refer to a class, but I can. Manaz Muallim was like absolutely huge on needs. I mean, we spent so much time in the beginning, that fundamental course, talking about needs analysis and needs assessment. And then, here I am years later, and I'm talking to a superintendent, and he's like, keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, keep your mouth shut until you're ready to talk and ready to put those changes in place. That way, those changes are aligned with the values of the system. So it's been interesting.
No, it's so
That.
great to hear you saying that, especially the listening, and paying attention, right? Like, you really kind of like being the observer of that as well. And I don't know if Sherry, you wanted to ask a question, Mr.
No,
Jack?
I was just gonna say I love that. And when Ian and I went through the program together, we didn't really have a class on change management, but we do now.
No.
And you really hit home. And I love the statement. You have two eyes, two ears, and one mouth. Use them proportionally. That is awesome. I mean, and so many leaders come into a field and you think that they had four mouths and one eye and one ear.
I mean, I see rookie principals all the time. I mean, my wife works in education too, and she's had a couple of principals over the years. And I've worked in the field long enough to where I see principals come and go. And one of the most common mistakes that I see from either a rookie principal who's pretty green and, just jumping in, or from a principal, if you're not entering into a turnaround situation, you got to stop and take a look around. Turnaround is a very different thing. You're on a clock. You got to get in and just, make the change. But when it's a relatively stable organization, to be able to come in and say, all right, I'm going to look around here, and then we're going to start talking through changes. And I just see rookie principals and principals come in, and to your point, they you would think they had four mouths, and that it just creates a very different culture for change. Whereas I've been telling staff for 12 years, like at Denver Online, change is the constant. We work in an environment that is not based always, there's not a lot of research out there on best practices for K through 12 online learning. Like there just is not like a big body of research. And most of the programs, when you look on kind of the national scale, there's some similarities, but there's some very, very distinct differences and distinct concept or contexts for why those schools exist. And I think that it's just very important for a staff in a school like mine that's kind of on the innovation in kind of that innovation space to understand that we're going to shift and we're always going to be in this change mindset so that because in my environment, it's kind of change or die. Like either you change or you become irrelevant. And as you start to see, and I'm sure we're seeing, I know we're seeing this on a national scale, the idea between or online and traditional models, they're starting to, there's a merging that's occurring. Even in Colorado, I was part of an initiative with the Colorado Department of, or the Colorado Department of Education, where I was giving feedback as part of what they called the Blended Learning Initiative. It was after COVID, and they were talking a lot about the flexibilities that were occurring during COVID. Well, that group ultimately passed some legislation in Colorado where any secondary school now can start to blend their model and, talking about seat time, talking about funding, talking about, and Colorado's kind of in the innovation space when it comes to blended and online learning anyway. But now we're starting to see this merging. Well, if I kept holding to we are solely, you're either in or you're out. You're either online or you're in person, then all of a sudden you start to become irrelevant. And the second you become irrelevant in this environment, somebody else is going to jump in and jump right on top of it. And so I've worked very hard to keep my staff in that change mindset, that constant change type of a mindset. And it's worked out well for me. And it's part of the reason I love my job.
Yeah, okay,
So
and then
that
I'll ask your next question because you've touched on some of the strategies by pulling people in, but what other strategies do you use to keep people on board?
Um, I think there, so a lot, when we rolled into our major expansion after COVID, 95% of the staff had been with our school for 5 years or more. And I think part of that is they started being able to see career growth. They saw meaning, they saw inspiration in the work that we were doing with kids. Um, you know, I, I used to think buy-in was the be all end all of change management, if you will, or at least a very critical piece of it. And it is important. Like you want people to believe in the work that you're doing. That being said, when I think leadership requires push, and I've had to do pushing. Like when I decided to become the district solution for online or remote learning during COVID, I had a staff of people who were like, what are you doing?" And I just looked at them and I said, "If not us, then who?" I was like, "If not us, then who will take on this charge?" And when they take on this charge, are they going to make all the same mistakes that we made, 10 years ago? And the staff really looked at me and was like, "Yeah, I think we have to step up." And I used a graphic as we were running it, as we were going out of that year. And it was literally Batman running from a fire. And I told him, I was like, you all did it. You're the heroes. Like you came in and did it, and the fire's behind us, and now we're moving forward. And so I think it's really helping people see, creating a compelling vision for people to see, so that they become very invested in the work that you're doing, but also helping them to see this is the path forward. This is how we're going to achieve that vision. And so I never really put a whole lot of stock in mission and vision statements, and I don't know if I still do on like that formal level, but I do think that if you're going to lead a group of people down a pathway of change, there has to be some compelling vision, some inspirational something that helps to kind of intrinsically drive them. But I don't necessarily know that it needs to be full-blown buy-in, if you will, because sometimes change needs to just happen. And from a leadership level, sometimes you can see that the change that needs to happen prior to the people who you're leading. And I think that, I mean, it's perspective, right? Like I think people just have different perspectives, whereas I can see my whole school, but then how my school fits in within the district, how my district fits in within the state, how my school and district fit in kind of on that national level, I think is just really, it's an important perspective that I have. And so I just keep bringing it. And sometimes I annoy them, but usually a couple years later, people come to me and be like, I understand why you did what you did.
No, and it's so good to hear you talking about the process, and especially involving in change management. Change management. One of the things that I was gonna ask you, yeah, and then this might be like one of those I mean, multiple questions in one. It's like about and what are the challenges that you face, in this change management, right? Like, what were some of the biggest hurdles, in the process, especially when you're talking about like, as you have to get this vision for, get the buy-in from everybody,
hmm
right? But also all the demands that you may have had to have as part of like, growing school, right? Creating that identity, like how did you overcome them, what were some of the challenge and how did you overcome some of these hurdles that it happened as you start engaging in this change manage process.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges is that we're operating within a system that wasn't necessarily built for us, as a school, if you will. When we start talking about things like seat time and we start talking about like, if you notice, if you remember back, and I don't know how much you looked at public schools during COVID and the COVID-19 pandemic. Um, what I saw schools doing was trying to recreate what happens in the regular traditional brick and mortar classroom and pop it on Zoom. And so what you ended up with were kids, sometimes really, really young kids, let alone, I mean, kids operating and learning in a kind of a poorly and hastily designed space. And it was all people could do. I think was how do we take it out of this modality and put it in this modality and recreate exactly what we were doing? And I think people just realized it didn't work. And I faced that almost on a daily basis in a number of areas. I mean, right now I'm dealing with a situation where we're expanding our supplemental concurrent enrollment. So offering college classes to students all over the district. And we're working with about 16 different schools throughout the district. And it's just the first semester of implementation. But what we just noticed a couple days ago is that now all of our data dashboards are messed up because I've got almost 100 kids that have been pushed into my school and their data is still showing up, or their data is showing a lot up along with my full-time data. I'm accountable to my full-time data, and here's all these supplemental kids in there too. And so everything's all wonky and people are looking at me like, dude, what did you do? And I'm like, well, this is one of those hurdles. And I think so you do find those hurdles around how do you put something in place that looks nothing like anything else within the system. And I'm sure you can imagine there's lots of different conversations and meetings and initiatives that have to be taken to make sure that the system adapts to the work that we're doing. And it's very much how to lead when you're not in charge. There was a book written years ago called Getting It Done, How to Lead When You're Not in Charge. I think I got it when I was in undergrad. And it is it's definitely a perspective that I kind of hold to myself to is like how do I influence the system to make sure that my school operates within it but operates the way that it needs to in order to be effective. And so I think that's really the number one challenge. But then you run into other things like people. I mean, managing people is probably one of the hardest parts of my job, to be perfectly honest. Like the other stuff I just talked about, that's the fun stuff. Managing the people, that's the most difficult and challenging piece of it because everybody comes with, their needs, their wants, their aspirations, like all of the things that they roll into a job with and their expectations of what the job should look like and trying to help them understand like hey, this is bigger than just you as the individual. So we've got to figure out how to help you work most effectively within the systems that we're creating. So it's there's so many challenges when it comes to change, and I think it's just making sure as a leader to be mindful of those, to be sensitive to people's needs, and to be, just not stray from the push, if you will. Like, even though you're dealing with these challenges, understanding that there's a lot of patience involved. And yeah, I do my best.
And I don't know if you remember, we took a class from Murdoch on project management.
Hmm.
You remember? So I teach that now.
Nice.
Yes. And I think a lot of people don't see themselves as going into these leadership roles. And what I tell them is, right now, you just have to learn to manage your own projects. Like when someone comes to you and says, "Hey, can you do this?" You have to look at what you already have on your plate. So you have to learn to manage your own. But then when you're in these positions for a while, you do potentially get these promotions and you do have to lead teams and people. Can you talk about some of the challenges and then how you overcome them with managing people and getting them to do their pieces and parts so that you can continue
Hmm.
to move forward on the timeline? And this will be our last question.
Super hard, Sherry, as I'm sure you know. Like, I mean, it's the most difficult thing because everybody has a different definition of what quality looks like, I think. And I think it's really trying to be as clear as possible about this is the end point. How are we going to get there? Or this is the milestone that we're shooting for. What are the activities that we need to do and the actions that we need to take in order to get there? Making sure that those are appropriately assigned, but then also making sure that there's accountability to the team for getting the things done that need to be done in order to make for a very successful project. So yeah, it's I don't even know how I do it. Like, I mean, there was a study years ago, and I think it really speaks to kind of that the Johari window, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with, as far as known to self, known to others on two axes, and you know, some work around that came out of studying nurses years ago and asking very seasoned nurses, why do you do like very successful seasoned nurses. Why do you do that? And a lot of times those nurses couldn't answer the question on why I do the things that I do on a daily basis. And I think that that also happens after you've been there somewhere for a long time. Like my two assistant principals who I've been working with for almost a decade now, they've kind of moved up from teaching and counseling positions over the years, and they're relatively new to school leadership. And so a lot of times they'll ask me questions, and they'll be like, How did you know to do?" I don't know, man. I just I do what I do and I do it the best that I can, and I use all the experiences that I had leading up to this. And so a lot of times you find that you've done a similar thing. So it is really trying to make as explicit as possible what your intentions are, what the goal is, and making sure that the folks on the team know where they fit in to that overall goal, so that people hold themselves and you can hold them accountable to the work that needs to be done to achieve the milestones in the overall project. So that's my best guess.
I love it. That's great. No, and I think you hit it right there of making sure that people know what is expected of them rather than
Mhm.
just giving a task and say, go do it. But it's a task, and here is, we need this at this caliber, and we need it done by this date, and we need everybody to work together. So if somebody reaches out, you know, for being an SME or whatever,
Mhm.
please respond to them in a timely manner. Like just let's work as a community.
Well, and that's one of the things that, we were going to talk a little bit about instructional model, but one of the first things that I did was created that model and created a graphic around that was very much built on response to intervention at the time. Now it's called multi-tier systems or student success. Or all in all, what it means is it's just around responsive instruction. But and so you have that triangle, if you will. But then underneath it, what I did was is I created a set of I guess the word would be behaviors. Back in the day, I called them pillars. It shifted to commitments. But what's nice about it is it really laid out for staff, for students, and for the support of adults in students' lives. This is the common language we're going to use to keep us all on the same page. And so, it's really making sure that we're all engaged, that we're all communicating on a regular cycle, if you will, that we follow through on the things that we're doing, that, we have a continuous growth mindset, that we understand that the ability to bounce back is the right of all students. And we have to set up the conditions for that. And then finally, we have to advocate, and we have to advocate in a way that gets us where we need to be. And so what that did was it gave my staff a common language for interacting with each other, but then gave them a common language for interacting with students. It gave students a common language for interacting with staff, and then it gave parents, guardians, supportive adults a common language and a common set of focus areas to say, if I do these six things really, really well, I'm going to be successful here. And it goes for all three of those groups. And it's interesting because that has really very much sustained our school and been pervasive in our school culture from 2014 to 2026 now. And so it's been but yeah, I think that clarity is just super important to your point, Sherry. So yeah, so there we are.
Thank you, Ian. We really appreciate you
Absolutely.
coming and, joining us just to have this conversation. I think like, we may need to have you coming for part two, because it's one of the things that we always see as we do these podcasts is like we don't have enough time to unpack everything that can and should be unpacked, like in these little sessions. It's like, there's a lot. And one of the things that I heard you saying, like, that you kind of sometimes like, I don't know how I do it, but I think like you do, it's just like that you're already doing it itself. And then it's so automatic that, sometimes you have to almost like, see yourself from up top to see everything that you're doing. But it's just because it is a lot, that you do. And then these pieces are just coming automatic to you. And for someone that's probably like new to this, they need to be like, but wait a second, how does this go? And I think like you coming and bringing up that instructional framework is like that communication plan piece that is so important to get things working the way they're supposed to work.
Well,
So
because life moves pretty quick. Sometimes you got to stop and
yes.
take a look around, right? I mean, and even as a leader, sometimes you got to step on back, take some reflection time, and be like, I wasn't clear with that at all because I screw it up on a daily basis. But I do know that as long as I keep that mindset, I'll remember to go back and look around. And as far as, part two or whatever you guys need me for, 17 years has been way too long. I am more than happy to stay connected with you all. If there's ever anything you need, you just hit me up and we'll make it happen.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Sherry, good to see you again, my friend.